Good evening everybody, and welcome to what's happening in John's shed. Another little episode on the gearbox and clutch from the Velocette Valiant, and also of LE. It's almost the same. Okay, now this gearbox is going to replace the one that came with the bike because it seems to be have a problem with the gear selection, and also when I turned it over I heard something clanking inside loose, so I thought it easier that I've got this gearbox. I know it's in good condition. The teeth on the clutch basket are perfect, and I've done a few little jobs on it. And just while I've got it in bits, this strange kickstart arrangement that Velocette came up with, obviously because the crankshaft on the bike runs longitudinally on the bike, big word, to get that rotary motion for starting, your kickstart is going to operate in this mode from the side of the bike. So to get that motion into that motion is quite tricky. BMW had a kickstart that came out the side, so when you pushed it down it operated it, which I thought was a very good idea. Couldn't see any fault with it, but obviously Velocette in their wisdom didn't like that, so they came up with their own idea. So where my hand is here, this square drive is the kickstart shaft on the bike. Take note of that little tab there. Right, so that, when this is right back down, and the position of this, I've marked it with a marker pen. So this has only got a stroke of that, which is not particularly brilliant, and it only gives you one very short stab at the kickstart on the Valiant. So when that's in that position, that is right down at the bottom. You can perhaps see the shape. There's some grease on that face because that's a sliding face, and it's under quite a lot of pressure when it's being operated to turn the engine. So that's that motion. Here there's a bearing in the casing, and this piece is out of the reduction gear casing. So I've took this out just so you can demonstrate. So this goes through the reduction casing with a gear, and you've seen the assembly that goes on here, which is the clutch assembly. Sorry, the kickstart quadrant. I'll get it right in a moment. So with a nut and a washer on this end. So this, when it's all fitted, fits in there like that. And when it's in its position, this is a spring. It's loose at the moment because I can't put it under tension because it's not in the right position to do that. So when that's where it would be when it's all sat ready to start. So when you turn this shaft with the kickstart lever, it does this. It pushes this bottom one that you can see moving now. It pushes that up, and because this one is sitting on top of it, it pushes that up, making this turn in a rotary fashion like that. Now, so that's quite a limited movement, but it's enough to start it. It works. On the hand start LE, it's exactly the same setup. It's just that you have a handle sticking up with a rubber handle on the end. A lever sticking up with a rubber handle on the end to do that. On the Valiant and the later LEs, it had a kickstart. So the only real problem is on an LE, the footboards actually stop the kickstart going right down and doing more than sort of third of a rotation, because, and this is not uncommon, if you kick an LE over with the footboard off on the kickstart side, what happens when you do this? Because there's nothing to stop the kickstart going further, what it does, it actually goes past this So that is now the wrong side of it. And what happens then, because this is under spring tension, it does that. So when you take your foot off the kickstart, it stays there. And there's no return spring action, because that's the return spring on this. So this is just floating about and it does absolutely nothing. And because it's all clamped up, the casings are on here, it's all bolted up, you can't even see into here. You can't get into it. You can't see it. It's a pain, to say the least. So let's put it back to its position. That's how it would be normally. On the Valiant, it hasn't got footboards, because it's more of a motorcycle. So what they've done is put this tab on here as part of the casting, and on the frame there's a bracket sticks out that this seats on to stop it going too far and overstroking. So if that only goes to there, that's fine. That spring pressure, when the pressure springs all connected up, that spring pressure pushes it all back down again wonderfully. So when your kickstart is operated, it gets right around there, this hits its stop, and it can't go too far until that happens again. See, that's the wrong side of this there. Right, so that gives you an idea of how this actually works, because it takes some working out and it is a bit strange. Excuse me. Right, what I will do, and I haven't done it, I should have done, I have actually done it. If that does overstroke and do this, I did it on the bench on my Valiant, just testing it, and when it went past, of course the engine wasn't in the frame and there was nothing to stop the kickstart going too far, and I actually did that and it went click inside, and I thought, how very unfortunate. So what I did then was undo these, and you can juggle this about. If you take this stud out, I actually took all the these two studs out. If you take this stud out and poke a suitable instrument through there, which usually starts off as a screwdriver, of course, because they're pretty universal for every job. Let me take that out of the way so you can see. So then, when it's overstroked, so that goes to there. So what you have to do is turn it back, get it right down, as far down as it'll go. Take that stud out. There, I took that one out as well and loosen this, which gives all this some movement, bearing in mind it does sit in a bush there. So if you pull it back too far, that drops out as well, so you have to wriggle it about to get back in. So it is fiddly. But what people have done through that hole, and it's not simple, it's not easy, is while you put that back in its position there, down there, that's back in its lowest position. Bearing in mind this is all built up, so you can't see any of this that I'm holding now. So this, initially, when that's overstroked, this will be right down here. So to get this one back, you've got to lift this up until you can do that. So, as I say, when it's in the bike and all bolted up, you can't see any of this. So it's a real challenge. But with this being loose and you can move it about and you put it back down there, you can actually put I made a bar up out of a sacrifice screwdriver, so it's a bit more tensile strength to the steel in the screwdriver. I managed to retrieve this, bearing in mind it was down there, by poking the thing in there and messing about. I actually managed to get my screwdriver under that face there and push it back up sufficiently to do that. Once I've done that, that could go back down there. And then, of course, you've got the tension of this spring fighting you all the time. So then you've got to jiggle this about to get it back into that inner bush. And it is a challenge, but it can be done. I've done it. I believe, and I've never studied because I've never seen the early one. I believe they're slightly different somehow on these stud holes and it makes it a little more a little easier to do what I've just described. What the difference is, I'm not quite sure, but it is doable. What you can do is take this assembly out completely, of course, so that if this is overstroke, that's gone over there. You can actually undo these 3 bolts here and pull this assembly right out, which would give you access into here to retrieve this over-centered one here. You can actually push it up there and then poke something in the hole to hold it in position. Then of course you've got to hold that with one hand and juggle all this assembly back through there into its bush and onto those studs. Yeah, it can be done. It is marginally quicker than taking the engine out and splitting the whole thing, I must admit. I suppose once you've got the right tools and the knowledge, it'll be a lot simpler. But anyway, that's that mystery solved, maybe, for people when they say my kickstart has stopped working. Right, this assembly is all done. It's got a new seal behind here. This is all tightened up, tab wash it up, so that's ready now to go on my Valiant. One top tip, that's the gear selector. I put that on to test all the gears. One top tip is, this is the clutch operating arm, and I'll unclip this. There's 2 or 3 little things I can show you there. This button here, that is a push rod that goes right through the shaft and is operated by this arm. You can see the point where it pushes. This is the clutch operating arm, so the other end of your clutch lever goes into there. So when the clutch is all built up, I'm pushing from the other side now, that clutch arm there has a cable connected to here. So when you pull your clutch lever, it pulls that, which in turn, because of the cam on there, it pushes this through. So I've just pushed it back. Right, so while I'm here, this here is on an eccentric. So if you undo this lock nut and turn that bolt, it moves the pivot point of this, moves this in and out, so you can gain or lose adjustment on that push rod, because on the clutch cable the adjuster is midway, I believe. Yes, it is, and it can be awkward to get to, but also you can run out of adjustment or not have enough adjustment, and that is pulling on there all the time. You can't get any slack. So what that's doing is actually disengaging your clutch, and you can get clutch slip very easily. And also, of course, if it's slightly under tension, it's putting stress on all the rotating parts all the time, which you really don't want it to be doing. That's why you shouldn't sit with your hand on the clutch in gear for long periods of time, because of the stress it puts on everything and wear. So that is how that operates. So main adjustment you can do on there, lock it back up again. It is very awkward to get to that when it's on the bike, but it can be done. Lock that up, and that then gives you enough adjustment on your cable to do the fine adjustment for your lever position on the handlebars. Right, so this is the other end of that little push rod I've just been pushing backwards and forwards, if I can find it. There's the end of the push rod, so that when I operate the lever from the other end, it pushes that out, and that's what pushes all your clutch plate assembly against the springs to release the clutch. So when you pull your lever in, the clutch can spin freely and be disengaged, and then when you take your hand off, that goes back in because of the pressure of the springs in the clutch. That pushes that back like that. This is in 2 parts, and it's necked on the inner part on both pieces are identical to look at, and that goes in that way into the centre there. So when you put the engine and gearbox assembly back in the bike, what has happened to many people, and it almost happened to me when I did the Valiant, this lever always wants to go that way and fall down, and it's out of the way. Then you think, oh, that's okay. So you put the thing in the bike, and then when you come to do that, you can't get it back up because the frame's just here. It runs across here, and this is on the wrong side of the frame. And oh, how I laughed when it did it. It was hilarious. So what my top tip on this was, when you've got it all ready, something simple like this, just slot it into there. I use a spring very often. It's a clutch return spring off from a Mini, but it fitted perfectly. It's just tucked through there and through there, and it holds that to where it should be. When it's all assembled, this lever will be slightly further this way. I've just done this to show the process, really. So that would drive that output shaft there goes into the end of your drive shaft, and then you snuggle it all together, and these bolts here mount on the mounting brackets on the frame there and there. So that is that little assembly. I hope that's helped in some way. It sounds a bit convoluted to get around to your story, but on my other Valiant, there was no kickstart with it, and not realising the difference, I found a LE kickstart which looks the same, but it hadn't got this. And I thought, oh, well, that's going to be easy to do. So I made a piece, welded it all on, blended it all in. The chrome was all much like this one, so it didn't really make a lot of difference to the look of it. I intend getting it chromed one day, maybe. Doesn't stop it working if it's not shiny, does it? So I did that. I thought, oh, brilliant, I've now got a kickstart. I got a rubber for it, and we've cracked it. When I come to fit it, it's a sudden realisation that that square isn't in the same orientation to the lever as on the Valiant. It is actually one square over, which I didn't realise until I got everything built up in the bike, and I thought, put the kickstart on, and the kickstart then, of course, sits, I believe, I'll have to check that, yes it does, sits further up, which you think, oh, well, that's not a problem. But the problem comes then when you actually operate it. It's actually turning, this is actually turning further round than it would if it had got the Valiant one on. Because obviously the one that I made was up here. You kick it, it moves all the way down till it hits its stop. Well, it's gone another square round, which we go back to that job where it overstrokes it. So bear that in mind if you're ever swapping parts around. These are quite unusual because the Valiant, and they have this little tab cast in. As I say, I made one. I did get around it, but not after a bit of delay with the build. So that's that. I have here, one I prepared earlier, the original gearbox. I took off the Valiant. As you see, I've just identified it there because I do get confused easily with what came off what. This is exactly how it came off. I've not cleaned it or anything, so as you can see, it's all very similar. This is where the kickstart mechanism goes in through here, and this is the stud I told you about that you can take out, and that is right through. It's not a blind hole, it goes right through, as are all of them, I believe. I didn't take that one out, but these two. So you can poke something through there. It is very limited, but as I say, if you take this assembly out, you can actually go in through here and operate the inner lever like that and sort of recover it, and then poke something through the stud hole to hold it up there. That's just so you can see inside a bit more. As you can perhaps see, these teeth on this basket are really badly worn. Almost to me as if that's either soft material or maybe somebody sat holding the clutch for a long while. It's been jangling about. But the reason, one of the reasons we couldn't get it all apart was the tongs on the clutch plates were actually sitting in those little grooves. So it was actually holding the whole assembly together, even though there was no nuts or bolts. You could only move it a fraction of an inch, and it was proper jammed. And when I came to attempt, after I think I was the 6th person to have a go at it, I looked in through here with my torch, and I could see these serrations were quite bad. I've never seen one quite that bad before. I managed to get a screwdriver in here, and I levered between the clutch plates and that. But I had to go all the way around every one of them and sort of release them from where it had locked into these little grooves. And that's what held it all together. And it made a damn good job of holding it together, I'll tell you. And again, you can see I've put this on, just hold it up, just out of habit, really. If I turn this over and you listen, there's that's the stud I dropped earlier, but there is a loose, stop doing it now, there is a loose something in there. I may, when I've got time, take the top off here and I'll video it, and we can have a look inside at the selectors and just see what it's like, because I don't like to throw these things away, because obviously I know there's quite a few about, but they're not going to last forever, and it's nice for people to be able to see inside strange devices and unusual bits and bobs. Well, I think so anyway. So I hope that's of some interest, and I'm not too boring. Please don't forget to subscribe and like, and I've got another video on the way. I'll see you soon. Good night.